So we're live now to the masses of people at home watching us on computer. First of all, we'll start off, if you can put your phones off or put them on vibrate or silent, whatever. Minutes of the previous meeting, can we pass them as a correct record? Cool. Interests and lobbying, I'll start with Councillor Sokol. Mohan. You've been lobbied?
No, none, mate. Mr. Chair, no.
Councillor Pattison?
None, Chair.
Councillor Pinnock?
None, Chair.
Councillor Goodwin?
None, Chair.
Councillor Harman?
None, Chair. I'm also appearing for Councillor Donford.
Yeah. I've seen various emails about application number 2019/90151, no advice given. Forward, this is a public meeting, but we are being webcast, so if I can ask that you, no shouting, no clapping, no whistling, etc. Right, item 5, deputations and petitions. We have got a deputation, I do believe.
Dr. Stone.
Yeah. If you could use this microphone down here, please. On.
Richard Stowe, representing Kirklees Climate Emergency Group, Trees, and others. 3 points I want to draw to the committee's attention, specifically the Ashbrow proposal. Concern amongst a number of people brought it to my attention that the officer report was published before the consultation closing date, which was only yesterday. And there are missing and unresolved environmental management plans, landscape and ecological management plans, and an arboricultural impact assessment, all missing from the officer's report. Much more generally, as far as strategic planning is concerned, we seek to propose to the council that they consider scope for greatly increased tree cover and other conservation landscaping in new developments, both residential and commercial. Significant semi-natural planting of local provenance species, especially birch and others, in groups, in corners, along fence lines, basically about 2 to 3 times the scale of planting of new development sites is entirely plausible and could actually radically transform the urban landscape in Kirklees. This would apply to particularly large housing developments and commercial developments, so that you could have a situation where the council gets international recognition for innovation. The second issue on that is scope for compensatory planting schemes, as you typically get in Scotland on wind farm developments, so that these big housing developments, 600 homes today, would support a significant amount of compensatory planting, perhaps hectare for hectare. I would suggest that actually the carbon footprint of the housing development should be compensated for with compensatory planting scheme, and it would not be expensive on the developer. Maybe 20,000 a hectare for farmland bought and planted is peanuts, and it would really put Kirklees on the map. I urge you to consider that as a serious proposition, and I'd be happy to join a working party to work it up. Thank you very much. Another 2 minutes, okay. Right, well, I think I've got my point across, actually. It's a very serious proposition. It's ambitious, but you look at the business plan for it and it's entirely plausible. Compensatory planting schemes, I mean, I've done forestry work in Scotland, and there are huge areas of compensatory planting that, you know, give you a double whammy with wind farms. If we're talking about new house building being environmentally beneficial, then this, goodness knows, doubles, quadruples even the benefit to the community. I don't know if it's been done anywhere else before, but it's a serious proposition. Compensatory planting schemes based on the carbon footprint of the new development. As far as, Ashbrow is concerned, it's a shocking proposition, actually. It is a beautiful place. It's special, adjacent to the school campuses. I appreciate that there has been a lot of care gone into it, but there's room for doubling that level of care, really. Really working around what's already there, and as I say, double or 3 times the level of landscaping. So it can be wildflower. So, for instance, ground reinforcement on roads rather than hard paving, with wildflower meadows planted into the ground reinforcement. So you leave about almost the full depth of the ground reinforcements to protect the grass and wildflowers. Birches planted in corners, along fence lines, holly planted in security fences and around infrastructure, and so on. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your deposition as well. Just to make a point, it isn't this committee's role to formulate policy. It implements that policy. So although I don't intend to comment back on Ashbrow, because it's an application on the agenda, members will consider that today. I have asked the officer to comment on the comments you've made when they do an update, so that'll be beneficial to the committee when they consider it. On the strategic type of question around tree planting, the council has a role under the Town and Country Planning Act to facilitate tree planting as part of developments. At a local level, we have our adopted local plan, and there are several policies within the local plan that seek for landscaping, biodiversity and tree planting. And the British Standard, which is also referenced in our local plan, again reinforces that message around replacement tree planting. They don't specify numbers perhaps, but they do specify the ability to replace, and the council is committed to that through its local plan policies. And I think you'll see generally through the planning permissions we grant a series of conditions regularly applied for landscaping schemes, replacement planting, but also the protection of good quality trees during development and once development's in place. Hope that assists. Thank you, Chair.
Item 6, questions. Right, this morning we carried out site visits at Cumberland Road, Stonethorpe, our agents were at Dewsbury. Now we move on to the applications themselves. We start at page 9, and this is the 190 dwellings at Cumberland Road, Stonethorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the case officer dealing with this application. It's a full application for the erection of 190 dwellings and associated landscaping and infrastructure land to the west of Skelmanthorpe. Sorry. So as you can see, Skelmanthorpe, majority of the built form is to the east, and the development site forms the rounding off. Should we side. And then there's the fields in question. The fields do a bit of an L-shaped, going down, then turning to the right. And then you've got field hedgerows and power lines cutting across it. And then the dip in the field is where an underground watercourse is located. And there you've got Huddersfield Road with a variety of different house types associated with Skelmanthorpe. And then a picture of the site taken from an access point from Huddersfield Road, looking towards Beedale Drive on the right hand side and the backs of properties of Huddersfield Road. There this photo is taken from Huddersfield Road again. It's where the proposed access will be for pedestrians, and there you're seeing the backs of the properties of Beedale Drive and the site in its entirety, the majority of the site to the north. Again, another site photo of the site showing Skelmanthorpe in the background. This photo is showing the construction of several properties, which is part of the same site allocation, but not related to this particular planning application. And here, this photo is taken from Beedale Drive, looking towards Huddersfield Road, showing a variety of boundary treatments that dissect the fields, as well as then another photo looking towards Cumberworth Road and showing the undulations in the landscape and boundary treatments again. Another photo of Beedale Drive showing bungalows that face that back onto the site, and also the two-storey properties that back onto the stream. And then this photo is showing the watercourse that runs through the site, on the southern field, and it shows a variety of land drains and block drains. This is the embankment to the site, and then you can see water at the bottom and a few water from the embankments going down there. So again, this is the watercourse that goes through the back of the properties that residents kindly let me have a look at. It's between Beedale Drive and Cumberworth Road. As you can see, some of them are in need of maintenance and repair, and some are fine and maintained very well. Again, just going through them. And then, like I said, just this photo just illustrates that these are the gardens associated with Beedale Drive are long gardens, and same with the Cumberworth Road, and the watercourse is very much at the bottom of the garden. And then when you get further downstream near Beedale Avenue, Beedale Close, there's a watercourse that runs to the rear of the properties. It runs abuts part of a residence deckings, and then it goes underneath the deckings as well as in between decking as well. And this photo shows where the watercourse ends, and then not ends but goes underground and then across Beedale Avenue and then through the built form of Skelmanthorpe. So if the proposal's for 190 dwellings. It's an accepted housing allocation in the local plan, HS 140, and such site has already been robustly assessed as being accessible and a sustainable location. Given its location adjacent to already developed area and its proximity to a number of facilities, the principle of development is considered by officers as acceptable. And it is therefore in accordance with the vision and the strategic objectives, as well as the policy LP1 of the local plan. The proposed layout has evolved since it was first received as a pre-application inquiry a couple of years ago, and officers have worked with the applicant to create a layout that works with the local context, and as such we believe that a street layout has been achieved that fully accords with policy LP24. The proposed layout shows a hierarchy of streets and spaces with the inclusion of Green Street principles, trees, landscaping measures, And it also shows houses arranged into perimeter blocks, which would create active street frontages, and which would aid legibility, and also establish a sense of place. In terms of the house types, typical house types have been proposed, which are products of Persimmon Homes, and officers believe that due to the varied character and appearance of the surrounding local vernacular, that these house types are acceptable. And also it should be said that all the house types are between 2 and 2.5 storey and between 2 to 4 bedrooms. During the planning process, residents in particular who live at Huddersfield Road and Beedale Drive have raised concerns about the potential proposal to have adverse effect on the residential amenity, but it's considered by officers that the latest layout addresses these concerns with greater separation distances than previously proposed. Officers consider that the proposal achieves the appropriate density and mix of dwelling houses, and 20% would be affordable and would be secured by a Section 106 agreement. As such, officers consider that this proposal would contribute in creating a balanced and mixed community in line with policies LP7 and LP11 of the local plan. During the course of the application, the Highways Development Management officers sought additional traffic surveys and key junctions to be reassessed, as well as committee development to be also looked at. This information has been carried out fully, and officers now back the proposal. In addition, a number of changes were sought to the layout with regards to car parking, and also in terms of ensuring that a bin lorry could safely navigate around the proposed streets. Officers consider that the proposal will not have any adverse effect on highway safety and is in line with LP21, as well as the guidelines in the Highway Design Guide, as well as Manual for Streets. However, to encourage residents to use sustainable methods of transport rather than their cars, a contribution has been agreed with Persimmon for a residential travel plan fund of £95,095 and a travel plan monitoring fee of £10,000 with £2,000 instalments for 5 years. This would again be secured by Section 106 agreement. With regards to drainage matters, it is proposed that the surface water drainage from the northern part of the site and the larger part of the site would drain into a large attenuation tank and then into Huddersfield Road. The proposed surface water for the southern part of the site will then drain into oversized pipes and a box culvert, and then into a watercourse that runs to the rear of the properties associated with Beedale Drive and Cumberworth Road. This is in line with the drainage strategy and planning policy. As we saw with the photos, there's necessary need for some downstream improvements, and the council's working with Persimmon Homes to secure the necessary funding to help with improvement works. Foul water drainage would be to Huddersfield Road, and it would be achieved by gravity, and it's understood that all of the dwellings can be drained into Huddersfield Road. And the Environment Agency, Yorkshire Water and Lead Local Flood Authority now not raise any objections to these proposals, subject to the necessary conditions and Section 106 contributions. The proposal would deliver public open space, but the plans do not show the provision of either locally equipped area of play or local area of play. Representations have been received who have concerned about the lack of children play areas within the local area for this scale of development. However, officers have considered these representations as well as the play spaces in the locality, and consider that a contribution of £194,481 would be sufficient in upgrading these facilities to the benefit of existing as well as potential residents. The application has been reviewed by the Council's Biodiversity Officer and considers that the information provided is sufficient, subject to securing the necessary conditions for ecological mitigation. And the arboricultural report submitted with the application raises no concerns with the tree officers who considers that no trees are worthy of protection or would would welcome any mitigation planting within the submitted landscape master plan. School contributions would be agreed with Persimmon through a Section 106 agreement. This is £520,000 and £520,000, 570. The education requirements for the development in total, it would include primary provision going to Skelmanthorpe Academy and also secondary provision going to Sissit Middle School. It should be noted that officers have received a complaint in how the application has been handled and also how the consultation period has not enabled residents to give their views in time for this committee, for officers to also consider their views in advance of this committee. Officers have provided a reply to this complaint, and it's included within the planning update. Subject to the conditions and the securing of the Section 106 agreement, officers believe that this application should be approved. Thank you.
Right, as first speaker, Karen Rowling.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Karen Rowling. I'm the Office Manager of Paula Sheriff, the MP. Unfortunately, Paula's unable to be here this afternoon because his vote's in Parliament at 5 o'clock, so she hasn't been able to get away, but she really did want to be here. So I'm reading out her statement. I wish to register my strong objections to this application on the following grounds. This proposed development, in its size, infrastructure requirements and the effect it will have on Skelmanthorpe and the surrounding villages, is completely inappropriate and should be rejected. The additional 190 homes and associated traffic movements will have a significant negative impact on the immediate area of Skelmanthorpe, its local amenities and the surrounding villages. Traffic in the village at peak times is significant. Much congestion centres on the Cumberworth Road junction, joining Huddersfield Road and Commercial Road, the central road within the village. This will be the key access to Cumberworth Road development, and a further 400 vehicles would have a substantial damaging impact on the village and the traffic movements. Alternate access to Cumberworth Road is achieved via Shelley Woodhouse Lane and Ponker Lane. There are existing issues with Shelley Woodhouse Lane, with dangerous pedestrian movements on the high-speed road, which contains a blind corner on a hill brow. This forces pedestrians near to the highway in poor weather. The majority of these pedestrians are children attending Shelley College. Increased traffic movements within the significant infrastructure improvements necessary in this regard would be a danger to pedestrians. This must be taken into consideration. With regard to local education provision, Sissit and Kirkburton middle schools are currently, both individually and collectively, over their pupil admission numbers. Shelley College, the only high school within the education system, is also over its PAN. Without significant investment, which I think would be over and above that agreed that the officer had just mentioned, in each of these facilities, and an unacceptable increase in class sizes, it's unclear how the places necessary within the system would be guaranteed. I'm also very concerned about the pressure that would be placed upon local sewage and drainage systems. It's not clear that there is capacity within the existing drainage systems and that there may be flood risks which are not addressed by the application. These must be looked into with the serious consideration that they merit. Finally, I'm concerned about the broader effect that this development will have on the village. Recent new build developments have largely been unaffordable to local residents and their families. This has resulted in the continued lack of truly affordable properties for locals aspiring to own their own home, and a change in the communities which had left many residents feeling their unique village identities have been eroded. The National Planning Policy Framework and Kirklees Local Plan discuss the importance of maintaining the green spaces and distinct character of our local villages. I believe that it's vital that in pursuit of this application is rejected. I ask that you take my objections into consideration when deciding this application. Thank you.
Next, I've got Ray Lawson.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm a Skelmanthorpe resident. My name's Ray Lawson. I've lived in the village for over 20 years. I object to the application. I object, along with hundreds of others who lodged their objections. I ask in the name of democracy that you act for the will of the people of Skelmanthorpe. Look at what our elected bodies think and say. Our parish council objects to this application. Our ward councillors object. Our member of parliament objects. There have been no supporters to the application, not a single one. The message should be clear. Nobody wants this development. However, the voices for objection are many. Because I'm allowed only 3 minutes to speak, I must tell you about the areas which affect me and my neighbours the most. I'm a resident of Heatherfold. I speak on behalf of my neighbours in Heatherfold. We are a community. We look after each other. We socialise together. We support our locality. We've adopted the maintenance of our neglected playground. We are a cohesive unit. We object to any access to or from Heatherfold from this development. We are a cul-de-sac. We intend to remain a cul-de-sac. I am also the chair of Heatherfold Residents Group Limited, so I speak on behalf. Myself and all the residents of Heatherfold, we object also to the link from Heatherfold to this development. I also have a letter from Walker's Builders who decline access to Persimmon from their land.
Next, Helen France.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My background is in applied research, and I also took a very active part in the local plan hearings. I was there throughout, so I do have some background in order to speak what I want to speak about today. We have now 750 objections to this application. I've very severe reservations about Mr. Carroll's report. There you are. These are all the comments that I've actually put in his report. I've typed them out. I can give them to members of this committee after I've spoken, if you so wish. That doesn't include the annex that suddenly appeared last night. Highly questionable. What I want to talk about is the supporting reports that you're being asked to accept. These are not independent, as claimed by the planning officer, and neither was this site robustly assessed as part of the local plan. Many weren't. Researchers would consider the supporting reports unreliable and invalid. UDVET is highly critical of reports relating to drainage and transport in particular. Let's be under no doubt about it. These are commissioned by the developer to support the developer's case. They are based and designed throughout to contain false positives. And we, in our responses, have attempted to illustrate in simple, easy to understand terms how this has happened. These positive results have been achieved by omitting data, insufficient data, unrepresentative data, and predictions from computerised modelling into which have been inputted inaccurate and inappropriate parameters and filters, particularly relating to transport. These results, some of them have even been interrogated in a way that computer modelling designers warn will lead to misleading results. Have you, councillors, read these tables beyond the summary? Have you read Udvet's responses, trying to illustrate what I'm talking about? This council has a responsibility to ensure it only accepts reports which are accurate, reliable and valid. Supporting report generation is not a tick box exercise. It should be subjected to deep forensic analysis and scrutiny by the council officers and those with research experience. We have no confidence this is happening. The consequences of getting it wrong are too serious, and I'm sure this will have resonance with you round the table and what's happening with your wards. You know, flooding, drainage particularly. If you've not read Udvet's comments because you've not had time to do so because of the timing of all this is possibly illegal, if you've not read the alternative technical report on drainage, which still on the revised drainage plans outlines 21 objections, if you have not read the lawyer's report outlining why this report actually contravenes local planning and the NPPF, you're not in a position to make a decision. In our view, despite the number of revisions, this application remains of poor quality and proposals are not fit for purpose. There is too much critical information which is being delivered late, and there's too many material matters that have simply been kicked down the line, not delivered or not determined. You cannot make a safe decision at all. The only safe decision is to refuse. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next, Simon Watson.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Simon Watson. I am a resident of Heatherfold in Skelmanthorpe. I've lived in the village for over 20 years. I object to the overall application being made by Persimmon for the following reasons. I support the objections being made by other residents of Skelmanthorpe regarding the flooding, the overstretching of the village amenities, issues around vehicle capacities, and lack of demand for property in poor road and pedestrian safety infrastructure on Ponker Lane and Cumberworth Road. Others today, and have done, will no doubt speak about these issues in more detail. However, I would like to speak about a specific point of objection. I live on Heatherfold. I can speak on behalf of my neighbours in Heatherfold. We are a community, as stated by Ray Lawson earlier on, a neighbourhood and a socially cohesive group of residents. We object to any access to, from Heatherfold from this development. We are a cul-de-sac and intend on staying a cul-de-sac. In the original application and plan submitted by Persimmon in January, there was no link to Heatherfold. There was a boundary. This was a preferred point for Heatherfold residents should the application be passed. In July, after considerable objections, Persimmon resubmitted their plans and a path and cycle access was added. No one has asked for it and no one objected to its omission. I would like to ask why this was added. I note today that there was no photographs actually taken from and represented to the councillors in this meeting today regarding the actual link from Heatherfold to the proposed development. There is a cycle and footpath route at the Huddersfield Road access, which is the most direct route to the local shops and schools and amenities. The route via Heatherfold is not required or needed. Heatherfold residents don't want to access this new public open space. In the report document provided to this committee, the officer makes a number of statements regarding his access. In section 5.6, it states, I quote, introduction of a footpath link towards Heatherfold to clarify the functionality of the public open space and to ensure greater compliance with LP5 master planning. In section 10 appraisal, the first section is principle of development. In that section, the officer states, I quote, 10.9, finally, policy LP5 of the local plan requires master plans to achieve community facilities to serve the new development, e.g. local shops, community halls, schools and health facilities. In this instance, the proposals for up to 190 dwellings do not in itself generate the additional need nor justify for such facilities to be provided on the site. So on one hand, the link was provided to comply with LP5, but it also states LP5 isn't actually applicable. In 10.42, I quote, these connections would potentially enable existing residents to utilise the proposed public open space. They will also encourage greater social interaction and community cohesion. I can state that the existing residents the officer speaks about, Heatherfold residents, don't want this link and don't want to use it. We are already a cohesive community. In summary, I object to this application.
Next, I've got Tim Bamford. Now, I believe you're also speaking on behalf of Gary Field as well. Right, you'll have 2 lots of 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Tim Bamford. I live on Cumberworth Road, Skelmanthorpe, alongside the proposed entrance to the site. I work as an operations manager for an earthworks contractor. The drainage on the southern area of the site is of particular interest to me as a point of discharge of surface water from the site into the watercourse is at the bottom of my garden. This discharge of surface water issue is probably the most significant issue in the southern area. Maps from 1850 show a watercourse originating west of the proposed site and flowing through the site and beyond towards Huddersfield Road. Maps from 1892 indicate the section through the proposed site has been culverted. Recent site investigation works confirm a 450mm piped culvert. It's unlikely that was done in the 1800s, presumably this was done more recently. The watercourse is culverted beyond Beardale Drive. The current EA risk of flooding from surface water plans indicate high risk of flooding in several locations, immediately west and immediately east of the proposed site, just prior to Beardale Avenue, in the area of Heatherfold, and just prior to Huddersfield Road. The FRA and the LLFA believe the flooding is caused by a submerged outfall downstream of the site, but as there are several areas where the flow is interrupted, there must be more than one restriction to flow. How would all of these restrictions be located and rectified as everything downstream of Beardale Avenue is culverted below ground? If any restriction prior to Beardale Avenue was removed and the 450mm culvert through the site replaced, then the flow would increase because of the natural flooding west of the site, which provides attenuation. However, as there are obviously restrictions beyond Beardale Avenue, the extra flow would back up and increase flooding west of Beardale Avenue. It is proposed the new 450 diameter culvert would be connected to the open watercourse via a new manhole. This cannot be achieved as the outlet from the manhole is below the invert of the stream. It is proposed the section of watercourse immediately downstream of the site will need to be desilted and so not to restrict flows from the culvert. This will not prevent the increased risk of flooding upstream of Beardale Avenue unless flow restrictions downstream of Beardale Avenue are cleared. How will access be gained to the open watercourse? This would in effect create an easement which riparian rights holders would fight in the courts to prevent further flooding. Finally, the 300mm orifice proposed to control the flow from the west of the site would be totally inadequate, allowing a flow of 86 litres per second, well in excess of the 2.5 litres per second which the EA class as high. We would ask that the committee refuse the application due to not having all the facts with regard to flooding and drainage. To approve it would not be safe. This one's from Gary Field, who's one of our experts. I'll just have to read from this. My name is Gary Field. I'm retired and live in Honley. Prior to retirement, I worked as a construction engineer, construction manager and retired as a project manager. All of the data I've used is taken from documents contained within the planning submission or government and construction standards. I have reviewed in detail the drainage scheme, which is split into 2 areas, north and south, and my conclusion is that it is seriously flawed and will result in flooding. The scheme proposed using attenuation storage with a controlled discharge is widely used but is not without problems. Problems regularly occur where the attenuation storage cannot cope and excess water is allowed to flood along surface water exceedance routes. Sometimes the water decides to choose a different route. The storage required is calculated using drained area and specific rainfall events. The drained area is obviously affected by the housing density. The figure given in Mr Carroll's report of 33 is incorrect. Based on the flood risk assessment, it is 39, approaching high density. This is pretty high given the rural location. The average for all allocations in LDP for Kirklees Rural is 30, despite Mr Carroll stating that Kirklees target was 35. But the national average density for 2017 and 2018 was 25, which makes 39 look very high. The northern drained area stated in the latest flood risk assessment is 20,000 square metres. I have calculated this area as 26,000 square metres. The specific rainfall event is 1 in 100 years plus 30%. The flood risk assessment uses 112 millimetres, which I consider significantly low. The flood risk assessment sizes the tank as 2,236 cubic metres. The tank size using 26,000 square metres is 2,905 cubic metres. 669,000 litres being released. For your information, the rainfall used in the calculation is 104 litres per second, discharge at 3.5 litres per second. Concern in the construction industry is about using a single rainfall event. It does not take into account rainfall over a few consecutive days. The ground becomes saturated and runoff increases from grassed areas, etc. In the case of the northern drainage area, this would represent an increase of 20%. In his own experience, he bought a house in Meltham, did the drainage calculations, pulled out, realising that they were wrong, and the garden has flooded. And that's the end of his report. Thank you.
Next is Nick Ryden.
Thank you, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. I have been asked to talk on transport issues. My name is Nick Ryden and I have lived on the corner of Cumberworth Road and Dean Road for 45 years and am 150 yards from this development. I have had a business in the village for 35 years. I have a very good local knowledge. I love where I live. We don't need any more houses. The place cannot cope with it. Transport-wise, Yorkshire Tiger service the bus service in Skelmanthorpe. They are not the most reliable service. Cumberworth Road has one service, Wakefield to Holmfirth and back, one bus every 2 hours. I have a bus stop at the bottom of my garden. Very few people use the bus. Skelmanthorpe had a train station, but this was taken away years ago. Denbydale Station can only be realistically accessed by car and has parking overload, not good for working people. Parking is also overloaded in Skelmanthorpe. The fact is that most people will use cars on this development, the nearest shop being half a mile away, and it's uphill all the way back. Few people will walk. If each house has 2 cars, this, along with white van man, supermarket deliveries, school runs, I can see 1,000 movements in and out of this site daily. This amount is ridiculous out of one entrance into an already busy road, and a fast road at that. If you were to turn left out of the development, which was only one access, you will find cars parked at both sides of Cumberworth Road, half on and half off the pavement, which is pretty common these days, and especially so in the evenings. Pedestrians turn right towards Cumberworth out of the site. You will have no footpaths a lot of the way, overgrown verges, pools of muddy water, blocked drains with grass growing out of them. Walking in the dark is not recommended. In fact, it's downright dangerous. How can we allow this development when we cannot look after what we already have? This development will mean 5 years at least of noise, dust, mud, disruption and grief for all the residents of Skelmanthorpe, plus ongoing gridlock thereafter. This on top of overloaded, crumbling roads, footpaths, etc. I look forward to my peaceful retirement and hope that Kirklees Council wake up and see this development for what it is. I ask you to refuse this decision. Thank you.
Next is Hazel Sharp.
It's on. Okay, thanks. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I want to draw the attention to the people who have not seen it to this complaint letter sent to Mr. Carroll this week from IOP Consulting. To quote from it, your officer's report was published on the 16th of October 2019. The public consultation on this application ended on the 17th of October 2019. It's therefore very surprising that you were able to write a report concluding on the application prior to the consultation period ending. We suspect you're on annual leave until the 15th of October, so we assume that your report must have been written at the beginning of the consultation period. The purpose of the consultation exercise is to receive all reports and comments. You should then take into account every comment made or reported, and these put into the balance before making your recommendation on the application. The fact that you wrote your report prior to this period ending shows that you had predetermined this application before the consultation period was over, and it was no more than a paper exercise. You obviously had no intention of taking into account anything that was submitted. This is unjust, unfair, and most importantly, challengeable. We understand that on the 16th of October, you visited properties adjacent to the site, asking about existing flooding and drainage issues. This visit was welcome, however surprising, you made it the day before your report was already written. But more significantly, as far as the residents were concerned, the LLFA had serious concerns over the site, and they had sent a substantial objection to the application in August. Nothing appeared on the council's website from the applicant addressing any of these issues. However, miraculously, on the 18th of October, in an about turn, the LLFA's report was placed on the council's website confirming that, I quote, further to comments dated 18th of August and subsequent submissions, Kirklees Flood Management and Drainage advises that with minor changes and appropriate conditions, we can remove our objections. What subsequent submissions? We haven't seen them. It is highly questionable as to why the comments from the LLFA were apparently issued on the 14th, referred to in your report on the 16th, but were not made public until the 18th. Why? This whole process has not been open and transparent, and your conclusion on the application was reached prior to receiving all consultation responses, in particular from IOP Consulting, UDVET and the Environmental Trust. In light of all of this, I would urge the Council to defer this item to allow for these issues to be properly addressed. If a deferral is not agreed, we reserve the right to challenge the decision through the courts. At the top of each document on the Kirklees website, it says the word democracy. It is not democracy when important decisions are predetermined prior to the end of public consultation. That is dictatorship, and it is wrong. Thank you.
Next is Frank Dolan.
Good afternoon, Frank Dolan, Skelton resident. I'm going to talk about Skinner's rats. Frederick Skinner, famous psychologist, studied rats because rats show remarkable human characteristics when they live in communities. He concentrated most on conditioning, but he also noticed that when rats were in communities with good infrastructure and lots of space, they were harmonious. But as soon as he started to introduce more rats and didn't increase the infrastructure, the feeding points, and the life became nasty, brutish, and short. And that happens, and it happens with us. We're not all that much different to rat communities. Indeed, in 2012, your own environmental report recognised the problems of inadequate infrastructure in a growing population. To Précy, it said, there should be no major developments in the Upper Dearne Valley until the infrastructure problems were sorted out. There has been no such sorting out up to now. Hundreds of houses have been built, perhaps thousands in the Upper Dearne Valley, but Skelmanthorpe's had more than its fair share. And what's happening is the further destruction of green spaces. It looks an insignificant amount when you look at it there, but it's salami slicing away. Soon we'll be joined with Cumberworth and then with Upper Cumberworth, and you'll have a small town without the facilities. So what's going to be lost? Well, valuable agricultural land, mature hedgerows, Creatures vital to the food chain, rodents and birds, and especially insects. We cannot survive without insects. The scientists tell us we cannot survive without insects. When did you last have to clean your windscreen on a summer's evening? Long time ago. When did you last see swallows that feed on insects? A long time ago. Globally, it's only a small amount, but these small amounts add up. We've got a real problem, and you have a chance to make some difference. What will we have? We'll have 200 boxes. They're described as executive homes. We'll look at them. They have garages. Many of these garages, you can get your car in, but you can't get your car out. They have 2 double bedrooms out of 3 double bedrooms. You can get your double bed in, but very little else. They have plots of land, small plots of land, narrow streets, insufficient parking spaces. 10 years ago, the Royal Institute of British Architects commented that British houses were 25% too small to allow healthy living and bringing up a family. I'll stop there. But I think you have a duty. You have a duty. Your first duty is to your residents, to your constituents, but you also have a global duty as well, and it's time to think about that. You simply must start to reject this type of application. Thank you.
Councillor Will Simpson.
Thank you, Chair. Colleagues, I'm here today to oppose this application. There are a number of issues regarding this proposal which have been outlined by my colleagues and members of the community in our many hundreds of objections. So I won't repeat everything that's already been said today. However, I do have to restate my most fundamental concern, which Chris has heard me state on a number of occasions, and which has remained unaddressed, I believe, by the proposal, which I believe makes this application contrary to local plan policy and an unsustainable development. Policy LP27 states that a proposal must not increase flood risk elsewhere and where possible should reduce flood risk, and fundamentally it must demonstrate that the proposal will be safe throughout the lifetime of the development, taking account of climate change. I remain highly concerned about the drainage and flooding issues that will not only occur during construction but on site, in the proximity of the site and on the wider drainage network throughout the lifetime of the development. In and of themselves, I'm unconvinced that the drainage solutions are adequate. The fact that it's gone from an objection from the LFA to those disappearing with just £5,000 added to some upgrading of the off-site drainage works, it just astounds me, to be honest. I'm not in any way assured that there's adequate knowledge of the wider network for us to be in any way certain that the floodage and drainage risks will be safe over any timescale. It may be the case that the prospective developers can do little more on site in their proposals to mitigate the issues, but that does not mean that the material consideration disappears. To approve a development of this scale committee, you have to be absolutely certain that I am wrong and be totally confident that this application demonstrates that the drainage network will not be made worse throughout the life of the development. I do not believe that the evidence is there for any of us to be certain that that is the case, and thereby I do not think that any of us can say with certainty that policies LP27 and 28 have been met and that the material considerations do not outweigh the national presumption in favour of sustainable development. Hereby, I do not believe this application can be considered a sustainable development, and I believe it must be rejected. Additionally, whilst Graham and I were out conducting one of our street surgeries this weekend, we spoke to one of our residents who's a firefighter in the borough and a volunteer firefighter at Skelmanthorpe Fire Station. On his behalf, I would like to ask that if you are minded to accept the application, which I sincerely hope you are not, that Highways finds a solution which will ensure best access at all times to and from the fire station, both for staff who are travelling there in their vehicles and then exiting in the fire engine on the occasion that they're required for a response. I also have to raise an issue with the education contribution following a discussion with one of our local head teachers. In the report, all of the £284,000 of the education contribution for primary places has been allocated to Skelmanthorpe Academy on the basis that it is within the catchment area, so the report says. However, there are 2 local primary schools in the Skelmanthorpe catchment, the closest of which to development is not included in the contribution, and that's St Aidan's School. The reason that I raise this is that the Council 2018 to 21 school planning places documents demonstrate that St Aidan's is operating at capacity, only one below its pupil admission numbers, and this has been the case for a very long time, operating over its PAN for a significant period also. St Aidan's is one of the most popular schools in our ward and operates at almost constant capacity. The school has also been recognised by Conservative MP Nick Gibb, the Minister of State for Schools, in a meeting arranged by Paul Sheriff MP, to be one of the worst funded schools nationally, which is struggling to get by. So I would ask that if you are minded to accept the application, which again, I sincerely hope you are not, that going forward, the distribution of the education contribution can be reassessed with those comments in mind. As I've said, I believe a fundamental issue remains with regard to policies LP 27 and 28, as well as a great number of issues that have been outlined by colleagues and members of the community today. I sincerely hope that you'll agree with me and ensure that our policies in the local plan mean that this is an inappropriate development and that it is rejected. Thank you.
Next, Councillor Graham Turner.
Chair, thank you. As always, when you go last in these things, you tend to try and repeat what's gone before. But firstly, can I thank all those who have spoken against this application this afternoon with such knowledge and commitment, and I support all the material objections that have been made so far this afternoon. So there's no little point in repeating many of those objections in great detail. So I just want to reiterate the important reasons for objections. Firstly, what I would describe as a footpath to nowhere. It's not needed and seems to be ill thought out, and a very simple solution to previous comments about the lack of paths. It shows the developers have failed to develop a logical solution and have simply gone for an easy option, which seems to be the case in many parts of this application. Boundary treatment, as referred to on page 119 of the local plan allocations, states that boundary treatments are required, and this application fails to address this sufficiently. We are all aware that we have a climate emergency. This council is one of the first in the country to sign it, and the declaration of climate emergency, and yet the boundaries are not tree-lined. This would be an ideal opportunity, should committee be minded to approve this, to improve tree coverage. Clearly stated on page 119 in the local plan allocations. Again, trying to do something possibly on the cheap, shall we say. The update, which was referred to earlier, contains reference to the connection with the existing watercourse to the south of the site, and 5k has been set aside for any work that is required. Clearly, anyone who knows anything about drainage or anything about building knows that 5k is woefully insignificant, won't touch any significant works that need doing to that. So that alone is, again, are we trying to, we all know what the current developers' business model is. Again, trying to do it on the cheap, 5,000 will not address any serious issues in that area. I've also read the report several times and have failed to find any reference to the local water table level, unless that is what is referred to at 4.3, page 11 of the report from ID Civils. It could be technical expression. Those of us who live in the area and are regularly in contact with people like Yorkshire Water and the council about various issues and residents know that there's been an increase in the water table, and we would have expected this issue would have been addressed somewhere in the report. If the water table rises, the flooding becomes more of a problem. This has been evident in some of our most outlying areas that are quite high over recent years. But again, I have found no mention of this in any of the reports, unless I have said this is what is referred to in 4.3. Highways 10.32 refers to the single access onto Cumberworth Road, and that one access is sufficient. Quite frankly, I don't support this, as the second access point on Huddersfield Road would mitigate some of the problems that will occur by the increased traffic movements at the junction of Cumberworth Road with Huddersfield Road. This junction, for those who know the area, is extremely complicated and struggles to cope with the current traffic, and any increase will make this junction even more difficult to navigate. And the lack of investment in the junction is a mitigating factor as to why this application should be rejected. Also, I don't believe that the developers have spent sufficient time and have explored all the options and have been prepared to invest the finance to develop a second entrance, which I believe they could do onto Huddersfield Road and to mitigate that problem at the bottom of the junction there. Chair, given the comments from the objectors regarding the potential flaws in the application process, then if you can't find it in yourselves to object to this, then you should at least defer it until this issue has been fully addressed to ensure that this process is fair and legal. Chair, thank you very much.
Next, Matthew Barrow, who's the applicant.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Matt Burrow. I'm here today to speak in support of the application before you on behalf of the applicant, Persimmon Homes West Yorkshire and Conroy Homes Limited. I'm accompanied by Liz Green of Optima Highways, who will be available during the questions section to answer any queries the committee may have on transport matters. We've heard from a number of people who have sought to identify various flaws with the scheme. They've suggested a number of reasons why the proposed development is unacceptable in planning terms and therefore should be refused. Whilst I respect these people's opinions, I do not propose to spend any time refuting the claims, as I am confident that the case officer's report and presentation adequately addresses all such concerns. Instead, I would like to highlight what the scheme can and will deliver. It can deliver 190 family homes. It can deliver a range of housing types of varying sizes and styles to meet market demand. It can deliver 38 affordable homes to those most in need. It can deliver financial contributions towards education, off-site play space, drainage and sustainable travel, contributions which in total are in excess of £800,000. It can deliver a sustainable residential development. The scheme before you has evolved through an iterative process whereby the applicant has worked actively with the local planning authority to develop a scheme which is acceptable in design and policy terms. The proposals are fully compliant with national and local planning policies and therefore should be approved without delay. Thank you.
Members, it's over to you. You've enough there to be going on with. Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. I've gone through this report very carefully last night and I've been on site visit this morning. But here, I'm really surprised to hear so many objections. Yeah, it seems to me they are right objections. Yeah, I had in mind only few. Although this application have some good merits by Section 106 contribution towards education and other things, affordable houses, but there are still some other things we need to look into that, yeah? Like that, got affordable houses. I don't like to be affordable houses to put 8 or 10 houses on one side. It should be a spread over 190 houses, not put a block of affordable next to the existing property. Access. 190 houses, I think a big estate. I don't know how we can deal only one access on this estate. I think this big estate should be more than one access. Again, I heard from this consulting company, there are some allegations about the consultation supposed to be finished on 17th October, but the officer's report being written well before 15, because I'm not sure it's true or it's an officer being on holiday, yeah? So it must have been written this report well before the consultation taken place, yeah? So we need to look into that, yeah? Again, Denbydale Council, Parish Council, they objected on the ground of layout and density of the property and impact on already overloaded drainage system. I don't know how you overloaded drainage, we need to look at that. Yeah, Councillor Turner has said about the footpath link to the Heatherfold. But I don't know whose this idea is to put a link road to the peaceful community living in the cul-de-sac. There is no purpose of that thing. Again, I heard on the coach of officers that type of housing is bit not right. Yeah, we need to look into that. So, Chair, these are my points I've raised. Yeah, I think it's not right for us as a committee member to approve this application today. It should be considered. It's up to the members to either to refuse this application or to defer it for further information. Thank you.
Councillor Pinnock.
Thank you, Chair. We have heard some very eloquent contributions in this debate, and I thank those local people who've taken their time to do that. Clearly, they think very strongly about this. The one uncomfortable fact about this site, however, is that it's designated in the local plan as a housing site. If we were to refuse it, which in certain circumstances I'm sure we would, we have to be certain that we are on very safe grounds and that we don't lose an appeal. So my contribution to this would be to suggest that we defer this application. There are a number of issues which have come up in the debate which certainly need to be looked at. The education contribution has been mentioned. I know that's part of Section 106, but there is a suggestion that it's gone to the wrong school, or that it's going to go to the wrong school. There are clearly drainage issues which I'm not convinced have been wholly resolved. There are some highways issues quite clearly. We've got only one access to this site, despite the fact that I've been told on a number of occasions by highways officers that you can get 300 dwellings off a single access. This is only 190. So, however, the question is whether it's a good idea or not in the circumstances of the application site. So I think that needs to be looked at. There's also a question of the distribution of affordable housing on the site, which could be moved around. Any more considerable changes to the layout, we would have to refuse it because we couldn't just tweak them. So I am going to move deferral on the grounds, and there may be others that I've mentioned.
Thank you, Chair. There's a couple of key issues that are concerning me a little bit about this application. The first is in relation to the culvert at the south of the site. Now, looking through the application, it does mention the contribution to the downstream area of £5,000, which has already been mentioned is not a significant quantity of money. And the report also notes that it's not the responsibility of the builder to deal with that. But I'm a little bit uncomfortable with it in general because you've currently got a blocked culvert that's underground, you're putting a development over the top, you're going to unblock that. What you're naturally going to do is create a lot more free-moving water, which is going to naturally find itself in that watercourse downstream of the site. And in that case, you are potentially creating an issue for those dwellings who have the watercourse at the bottom of their garden, in that all of a sudden you're increasing the flow rate into that area. I say I'm just not comfortable with the contribution. I mean, I know they're sort of saying that it's not the responsibility of the builder to deal with that, but I just kind of feel that this developer is doing a lot of work which is going to increase the flow rate. Therefore, is that something that needs to be looked at in a bit more detail? The second key concern I have is in relation to the access, which has also already been mentioned, in that I do feel there should be 2 access points. Coming down Cumberworth Road, particularly at the top, I'm sure, you know, Howie's agree that it is, well, in terms of policy basis, an acceptable road, but looking at it with my eyes, it does seem relatively narrow. There are cars parked on the pavement. And in addition, the junction at the bottom of Cumberworth Road, where it meets Huddersfield Road, is not a good junction. It's a very sharp turn to the left. You're putting in a lot of extra traffic on that road, particularly because you've only got 1 access point. I know that the current access, the pedestrian access to Huddersfield Road at the present isn't wide enough to put an extra road access point in there. However, I'm sure potentially if negotiations were done with the adjoining properties, they could probably purchase a little bit of those gardens. I don't know. I mean, that's something the developer to look at, which would allow it to be wider to facilitate an access point there. And my final point is in relation to the access to the cul-de-sac to the east of the site. I'm actually going to sort of say I do sort of support that because I don't think it's a good thing to have isolated developments, and I think it's good for communities to be able to walk freely between either community or on foot. I mean, I certainly wouldn't support access by road, but pedestrian access I do support, but I do have significant concerns about the access routes and the flooding, so I think deferral would be my preferred way forward too.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the moment, I'm a little bit twixt and between, and my options are refuse, defer. I'm certainly not minded to approve this application at this point. And I have a number of reasons to think that. The first one, and it's very widespread in the more rural areas, is the housing type. But they've got developers, I understand the economics of development, they're wanting to build larger houses, more bedrooms, and this is not necessarily the type of housing that we really have a need for in these areas. I don't think it does quite enough to address the need for smaller, lesser bedroom houses, and there are 2 reasons for that. The first are younger people starting out in life, wanting to start a family perhaps, and then we've also got older people wanting to downsize, which would then free up a 3 or 4 bedroom house in the chain. So I think we really should be looking more at smaller or lesser bedroom houses anyway. We've heard a lot about flood risk. I have experience in my own ward of sites that are at risk of flooding. I'm not convinced when the local plan was put together and housing allocations were put down on paper that there was any detailed assessment, and I don't think that there necessarily should be. I think it's a job for this committee or Heavy Woolen or Huddersfield housing committees to look at the detailed assessments. I've heard a lot of evidence that there's a relatively high water table, that there's a relatively high risk of flooding. So that does concern me. Access. 2 types of access. The first is to the development itself. It looks as if it is only just sufficient. It's certainly not an oversupply of access. May or may not be. The other access is to Skelmanthorpe itself. We're going to put more people living out there. And I certainly wouldn't wish to see extra traffic put onto Shelley Woodhouse Lane. as a Kirkburton councillor, I wouldn't like to see Huddersfield Road in Shelley becoming busier. I wouldn't like to see Shelley Woodhouse Lane becoming busier. We're running out of options. Unless we get some infrastructure improvements, we can't build houses because people can't access them safely and properly. We need to look at this, and it's something that goes beyond this current application. But it does worry me in this context as well. Finally, I have concerns about school provision. Shelley Academy, Shelley College, not sure what they call it nowadays, but it doesn't have a massive amount of spare capacity. We're short of options. At the other side of my ward, we're losing, or maybe losing, Almondbury Community School, which is going to put pressure, because some of my children at the moment go over that way. It's going to put more pressure on Shelley School, College. There's not necessarily the capacity there to cope with these sizes of developments. Most of these are family houses. The simple fact is people will be moving in with ready-made families. It's not as if we've got 5 or 6 years before they produce children of school age. They'll be moving in with children of school age and at different school ages. We need to be very, very much aware of that. I did hear Kirkburton Middle School mentioned something along the line. It's not got a great deal of spare capacity there either. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Chair. The only question I've got, and I'm probably going to answer it myself, is why is St Aidan's not mentioned? And I think that's because it isn't part of or this development isn't in its catchment area, I presume, and therefore the only schools. No. Well, the reports. I hear noises off, but the report says that it's not, or that the only schools that are in the catchment area are the two mentioned that are receiving funds. This application, as colleagues have said, it is in the local plan for housing, which does make it very difficult to do anything with it other than housing. We do have to get it right, though, to make sure it's the right application. So, well, at the moment, I'm not saying whether I support defer or not, but I'd like. Have I answered my own question?
Thank you, Chair. I've listened quite closely to the residents and members' debates. We are dealing with the site that is allocated for housing, as has been pointed out. That means that if we go for a planning decision, we follow what the plan says. The plan says this should have housing on it. So, okay, in principle, it will have housing. However, the detail has to be right. And a lot of what's been discussed today is about detail. Comments about drainage, comments about access, comments about schools. I don't accept the comment about predetermination because no decision has been made on the application. But I am mindful, listening to the debate, that one, I think we should explain through the highways officer why it is a single point of vehicular access, albeit multiple foot and bicycle access points. And you need to hear from your drainage engineer to respond to the concerns rightly expressed by residents, echoed by members and local members in particular. Now, it could be that you do decide to defer. That's fine if that's what you choose, and we can bring back a further report. But in terms of completeness, I suggest the highways officer gives you their opinion and the engineer for drainage gives you their opinion, and then that gives you a complete picture from the issues locally raised, members' concerns, and then a bit of your officers advising you. I hope that helps, Chair.
Thank you, Matthias. Yeah, I think as I mentioned to members on the coach, recommended guidance up to 300 houses are accepted off a single point of access, and even at that point, it wouldn't be reaching practical capacity. It's just that they say you get above that, and for other reasons, they would recommend a second point of access. So 190 is well within that 300.
Good afternoon, Chair. Paul Farndale, Kirklees Council, Flood Management and Drainage. Certainly a lot of points made. Just one thing, there was a couple of inferences that about the late reports. We do talk to each other, you know, he does know where I'm going to be coming from. I'll say something really obvious here. The report has a deadline for me. I would meet that deadline. It has been raining a bit over the last 4 weeks. I do have a job to do. That's why my report will have come in later than it usually would. If you don't accept that explanation, nothing much I can do about it. In terms of the culvert on site and opening it up, is a valid point, but if this development wasn't happening, the landowner would have a right to do that anyway, and quite frankly should be doing that. If we left it alone, you're flooding third-party land upstream. So I don't think there's going to be any decision to be made on deliberately flooding somebody else's land. Certainly not recommended by the LFA, that's for sure. I think I need to reiterate yet again about greenfield sites. Now, this is not just this site, this is every site over the last 10 years. That if it is greenfield, we apply a greenfield runoff rate that mimics. There's about 11 ways you can calculate this, but we've got a set figure so the developer doesn't choose the one that's most advantageous to himself, shall we say, or herself. Now, we only do, when we calculate it on the average annual event. This is for every site, because you get one opportunity to get this right. On this site, we're talking about 6 litres per second for the southern area. The northern area goes to a different outfall. If you get a storm larger, and you will, 1 in 30, 1 in 40, 1 in 50, right up to 1 in 100, because that's where the cut-off is for what a developer has to do nationally, we still restrict it to that annual event. So the bigger the storm, the less will be coming off that site than pre-development. Now, I do know a bit about drainage. If you want to argue the point with that and you don't believe I do, then you are combating HR Wallingford, the national experts on it. You are challenging DEFRA, you are challenging the Environment Agency, and you're basically saying these people don't know what they're talking about. Okay? So that's every site, that's what we do. Come into the culvert, do accept that. They have a right to repair. People should be maintaining downstream. The £5,000, you may believe that that's not adequate, but let me explain why we've arrived at that figure. That may be increased, if I'm gladly take more money if you want to do, but this is why £5,000 is adequate for that section going downstream. As it opens up, the watercourse clearly needs clearance. You've got even seen what looks like old Christmas trees falling over back fences. They will work its way down when that water flows through. Actually comes underneath a pipe and flows. There's people that have built stilts in the middle of the watercourse. You should have consent for that from the Environment Agency and latterly us. I'm not going to get into that now, but I haven't received any consent for any work since I've been at Kirklees for that. I think people should be taking their responsibility seriously. Unfortunately for the chap at the end, where the grill is too good. It's like, if you imagine what chicken wire looks like, but it's more robust than that. You've got openings about that big. That is going to catch everything. There's no way the Kirklees Council would put a grill like that on any watercourse. There's no way the Environment Agency would put a grill like that on every watercourse. I bet he's out there every week clearing it. And quite frankly, the £5,000 would cover Persimmon's adhering to local the planning policy, which suggests that they don't make the situation worse, and if they can make it better, they should do so. So the £5,000 is for that. You may be thinking, well, what's downstream of that? Here's why I know a little bit about drainage. Because we've cambered it, so we've looked inside it, right away past Gardener's Walk, some 300 metres down. We did that and a series of culverts around Kirklees because we want to get grant funding. That's where Councillor Firth's been today, by the way. We didn't put that forward because it's fit for purpose. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Right the way up. If you want to look at that video with me, and I'll gladly show it to the ward councillors, let's book an appointment and sit down if you don't believe me. Okay? In terms of the local flood authority and changing our minds, because there was a couple of inferences there, I feel I need to address that. Please follow the first objection, and it is, I always write a detailed report, some people don't like that, but I think it's open and honest. Look at the revisions that come in from ID Civils and see how they address those points. Look at the next objection that says what they have to do, in my opinion. Look at their third and then final revision D and see how they've addressed all my points. If you don't believe that, there's nothing much you can do about it, I'm afraid.
Not assess what happens further down down Elm Street, Dale Street, where it mostly it's the same.
Colleagues, you've got what to go on there.
Thank you, Chair. Can I reiterate my point about deferring it? Because I think the explanation from Paul Farndale is actually very helpful, because I think what we need to do in relation to the drainage, which is one of the issues I raised, was just to make sure that what he is saying should happen is actually nailed down in the application, in the permission. I'm not sure that it's there at the moment. I'm quite happy to continue to propose deferral. I don't know if other members have got other issues they want included, unless we can have an open deferral, which I don't think is necessarily a good idea. But certainly those issues are ones that I have picked up from the discussion, and I need somebody to second it.
So we're asking the developer to clarify through Lead Local Flood Authority the drainage management arrangements for the scheme as proposed. We will put that information on the website so everybody can see it, and we will bring a report back to the next planning committee picking that up. Is there any, and we'll clarify on the school issue, just to be clear. Is there any other matters? Sorry. You raised the issue of affordable housing, didn't you?
Affordable housing.
We will show you a plan next time then that shows the pepper potting.
Footpath link.
Correct, and it is pepper potted. Perhaps it isn't legible from that on that plan. We will show a plan to show how how affordable housing is pepper potted in several locations around the site. Is there anything else more that you want us to bring back next time?
No,
Sorry,
the footpath link. The footpath link to the cul-de-sac, yeah.
Okay, I think I hear there was some mixed decisions on that. There was a view that the cul-de-sac link was less than desirable by residents. That was echoed by ward members. Councillor Goodwin, however, perhaps expressed a slightly different view to that. My view is it is not necessary to have that link to make the development acceptable, but it does make good sense to have connectivity on foot. So it is a decision, in my view, for local people to decide with the developer after this meeting if they think that footpath is really important to retain or can come out. So we've got a month between now and next committee to have a discussion with the developer, with the ward councillors, and arrive at a considered opinion again on that element of the plan. And then we'll bring that back as well with an update.
Yeah, Chair, there is another point, and that's actually raised by the deputation as well, about trees and the developers' wish to strengthen the outside boundary of the site. I noticed from the plan there are one or two houses that are very close to the boundary, and I think we need assurance that any strengthening of the hedge is not going to cause problems with future occupants of those houses.
And we'll pick that detail up in a landscape update on that point.
There was something else which we got this morning, that was the size of some of the houses, which apparently are tiny.
This point relates to whether some of the houses do not meet what's called the nationally prescribed space standards. Now, that is a guide to house types to tell you whether houses are of a suitable size. However, you have to have a local planning policy on space standards to be able to enforce that. You can take a view as to whether those houses are good amenity or not, but you can't refuse an application because they're too small. But I think we could pick that back up with the developer, that's been raised by the chair again. However, if that isn't resolved, I wouldn't want to advise you to refuse an application on that element. But we will pick that up with the developer again and see what we can do. We've got an opportunity to fine-tune this plan to bring it back next time.
Can I just summarise what the deferral is then? We're going to defer to clarify the drainage management arrangements, to clarify the school issue, to clarify the distribution of affordable housing throughout the site. And those are the terms for the deferral. Other matters that have been discussed will be not part of the deferral, but will be brought up with the developer during the next month or so. Is that right?
You happy with that for deferments? It's been moved by Councillor Pinnock, seconded by Councillor Sokol. Those in favour of deferment, please show. That's 6-0. Thank you. Next, we move up to page 57. Right, everybody, time's going on. Next, page 57, this is the hotel at Stadium Way.
Can
Thank you, Chair. So I'm the case officer again for the proposed hotel at Stadium Way. It's a full application, not a reserved matters application, and it's within the red line or blue line boundary of the HD1 scheme, which is, I think you're all familiar with. Just talk through some of the slides. This is a proposed hotel. It's a 148 bedroom hotel and 329 space car park. Its access is off Bradley Mills Road, which will need to be adapted to facilitate this development. I'll just go through some of the photos before we go through the things, all right? So this is Bradley Mills Road, where, excuse me, the proposed access will go into the, and then you've got the car park on the right-hand side. There's the existing car park at the moment, which is in the red line boundary that will need to be adapted. The hotel will primarily be located on this recreational open space at the moment, which is unallocated in the local plan. As you can see, there's town estate houses in the background, and the recreational open space includes a basketball court and football fields. As you can see, the football stadium's in the background where the hotel will sit next to. And again, this is another viewpoint from the town estate looking towards where the hotel will be located. Along the bank is kind of a, this is between the hotel, so the hotel red line boundary is marked by them white posts in the background, and town estate residents. That land in between will be remain untouched. And this is still area of land which will remain untouched, but as you can see, there's play facilities next to the town estate residents. So the proposed hotel, I'll just read it from my notes if you don't mind. The proposed hotel has been designed for its potential end user, which is Hilton Hotel Group. The hotel would be an L-shaped building and consist of 5 stories with all of the 148 bedrooms on the upper floors and the majority of support services on the ground floor. It is proposed that the staff and visitors of the hotel will use the existing site access arrangements, which is the bridge across the River Colne, connecting the existing car park with Stadium Way. However, due to weight restrictions of the bridge, it is proposed that service traffic will use the existing gated access with Bradley Mills Lane. This will be subject to the necessary enhancement works of this access point, as well as the existing car park layout being amended to define a clear and direct means of access across the car park from and to the hotel. The of this development has been established, with the applicant providing information that demonstrates that it accords with the relevant policies of the local plan in terms of out and town centre location, sustainability, impact on green and community infrastructure and flood risk. Officers also consider great weight is attached to the previous planning permissions associated with the HD1 development scheme, which have already established the principle of development in this area. For instance, the approved indicative master plan shows that the retail and leisure uses on this site and a hotel was previously given permission on the land to the south of the football stadium. It is also considered that the development proposed is an integral part of the HD1 development scheme. As such, significant weight is given to the social and economic benefits associated with this approval in terms of the contribution of delivery of the wider HD1 development scheme. In terms of urban design, officers are of the opinion, I'll just move it back, sorry. In terms of urban design, officers are of the opinion that the proposal has been appropriately designed to take into consideration its local context. The hotel has an L-shaped and has been positioned and designed to take advantage of its riverside location, whilst being sited the furthest away from residential properties to respect residential amenity. It It's considered that the proposed architectural treatment of the hotel is of a high quality and contemporary standard that would generate the necessary visual interest within the vicinity. Although landscaping details are limited at this stage and would be secured by planning conditions, plans show a high quality public realm would be delivered with the necessary pedestrian permeability with the adjacent public rights of way and the existing footbridge. During the planning application process, comments were raised by officers in terms of site security, particularly during match days, as well as site stadium management. As such, the applicant has provided plans showing additional security features and the areas to be controlled and restricted vehicles and pedestrians, particularly on match days. With regards to highway matters, the proposed access arrangements are considered acceptable, subject to the provision of further details which can be secured by planning condition. Within the red line boundary, the car park has been adapted and extended to the rear of the hotel and now provides one less space than the current car park now does. Provision is also considered acceptable based on parking accumulation calculations which officers previously requested. Also, the proposed cycle parking provision is considered acceptable. Environmental health officers have not objected to proposals subject to necessary conditions, seeking further information regarding air quality, noise and disturbance, land contamination, artificial lighting and odour. And in terms of flood risk and drainage, although the site sits in flood zone 3A and therefore has a high probability of flooding in terms of the national government's vulnerability classification, to address this matter, the building has been designed in consultation with the Environment Agency, who raised no issues to the current design proposals, nor with the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy. The LLFA have considered the principle of development acceptable, but subject to more detail being provided in relation to a number of pre-commencement conditions being requested. Finally, the site falls within the floodplain biodiversity opportunity zone, a swift nesting zone, a bat alert area, as well as being adjacent to the River Colne, which is part of the Wildlife Habitat Network. A Phase 1 Habitat Survey report has been provided, which has been reviewed by the Council's Biodiversity Officer and is satisfied that the mitigation proposed in respect of the protected species is appropriate for the area surveyed. However, the officer has recommended a number of conditions to ensure that the proposal fully accords with the planning policy objectives. Subject to the necessary conditions and the financial contributions outlined in the report, officers recommend approval for this application. Thank you.
If I speak from here, is that right? Chair, I just want, first of all, I must declare an interest on a number of counts. Cabinet member responsible for regeneration, therefore would be obviously wanting to promote this as part of the regeneration of Kirklees. I'm also a director of the stadium, and of course this is a real asset to the stadium and so on. So those counts, clearly, what I particularly want to draw attention to is the recommendations with regard to section 106 and the idea of a committed sum to ensure that not merely that there is sufficient to compensate the people who have been adversely affected. That big green area is used by the people in that area at the moment. I think they should be adequately compensated. So I would expect the stadium, sorry, not the stadium, I would expect the development to absorb the cost, not merely of the section 106, I think it's 159,000, is that the figure? Yeah, whatever.
158,000.
Yes. But additionally, the people in the area have been promised that jobs would be available to people at the construction stage of this development and at the final stage. So used by the company that's developing the hotels, there's opportunities for employment. This is relating directly to a community of some 200 houses, people who live in 200 houses. It's in the bottom 10% in terms of compounded deprivation and poverty in this country. So it's an area that desperately needs this help. The sum could be used for a range of different reasons. There is a real need for greening in that area, and I know that people in the area have expressed the view to see that, and to some additional and added play provision. And additionally, it's been suggested that the people in the area might have access to the zone, which is an opportunity again for play in the area. And I think the stadium often said that they would try to encourage that. And my fellow councillor, Councillor Khan, has proposed the idea of maybe providing access with adequate payment to the gym, which is run by Cal, is it not? So if all of those things could be taken into consideration. I'd like also to point out, the last time we had a development which created the stadium, the people in the locality were not properly treated. They got a bad deal. They got virtually nothing from it. They got negatives. They lost half their gardens. They got noise from the business partners. So I am determined this time, as a local ward council, that these people are not going to be trampled all over. They're going to be fully and properly compensated and involved in the process. And the commuted sum is a way of enabling them to do that. I do appreciate what the officers have tried to do.
Andrew Chapman.
Hi, I'm Andrew Chapman from Brewster Bay Architects, the architects behind the scheme. I've registered obviously to answer any queries, questions or anything that comes up through the discussions today. I wasn't going to do a full 3-minute talk and repeat everything that Chris has already put forward, and he's described the scheme well already. First of all, I'd like to introduce Gareth. Gareth's the Managing Director of Kirkley Stadium Development Limited, and he's just going to run through quickly how the hotel fits in with the outline permission, the HD1 that already exists, and a bit more about that in general.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Gareth Davis. I agree with all of what Peter's just said, and if I may come back to those points at the end. My personal view is the hotel proposal represents an excellent opportunity, not just for KSDL, the stadium company, but also for Huddersfield more widely. In terms of our existing stadium operation, we already have a very significant non-match day conference and event business. It's very important in addition to the football and the rugby. About 250 events a year. A significant proportion of those would benefit directly, annually, from a hotel provision. But even more importantly than that, Huddersfield is perfectly located for conferences and events, being almost exactly halfway along the M62 corridor. On an annual basis, we turn down a series of applications for residential conferences, which we simply can't provide for at present. A hotel would, of course, deliver that. I expect that we'd be full every single time we had a concert or a rugby league international, both of which we have regularly. And of course, the hotel will directly benefit both the football club and the rugby club, obviously in terms of away fans coming to stay for matches, but also Huddersfield fans who live away coming and being able to stay as well. I've had a very significant number of conversations over years with leaders of other organisations locally about the real need for a quality business-grade hotel. Those conversations include the university, leaders of local businesses such as Syngenta and Cummins and others, and I believe passionately that the hotel will serve the wider community, not just the site. I want to say something about Hilton themselves and the actual brand proposition. Hilton is almost certainly the best known and most successful hotel brand in the world. What a marvellous and exciting thing for Huddersfield to be bringing a Hilton hotel into town. But more than that, the specific brand proposition, the Garden Inn. That is associated very heavily by Hilton with major sporting locations. Sunderland's Stadium of Light has one. The Emirates Old Trafford International Test Match Cricket Ground has one. The FA, the Football Association's National Centre of Excellence in Staffordshire, St George's Park, has a Hilton Garden Inn. What a fantastically exciting thing for Huddersfield. As the person who operates the stadium site in terms of not match day and non-match day operations in their entirety, I think the proposed location is perfect, and I'm very comfortable with all of the proposed car parking provision detail. I think it's a fantastic catalyst as well to be seen by the development world, to be getting going with development on site in terms of the prospects of the rest of the HD1 scheme. What Peter says about Section 106 is hugely important. What I would very briefly like to add to that, though, is that I envisage significant employment opportunities for the local community through the development of the hotel and thereafter the HD1. Thank you.
Carol.
Thank you, Chair. Well, Yeah, I am pleased to see, and I do appreciate everything that the hotel will bring to the development of the stadium and to Huddersfield as a whole. But I do agree with everything that Councillor McBride just said in terms of both giving local people opportunities for employment there, but more importantly, I do think, as is suggested in the report from Councillor Khan, that they do or should have some access to the facilities. I can see, even if they are that local people are employed there, they still may well be denied access to these wonderful sporting facilities and all the other facilities of the cinema, the zone, etc. It's really ironic that there is such sporting facilities very close to them, and yet all of this and previous development is taking away their access to recreational land. I mean, you're looking at the map of the estate, you'll see that I'm sure the density is far higher than 33 or whatever it is per hectare. They have very little garden space, very little road space. They can't park their cars at all on the roads, which is why the car parks have been built into the green space that is there at the back of the estate. So it would be really good if we can get something. I'm not going to vote against this proposal in any shape or form, and I should have said I'm really pleased to see that compared to previous application, that we haven't got a multi-storey car park overlooking the town estate. I mean, that was absolutely disastrous. But if we can, beyond making employment opportunities for the local estate there, provide some access via 106 to the sporting facilities or other facilities that there are around, that would be great. So I don't know if that means that's just, I'm not quite sure how we can do that, if it's upping the amount of money or, but certainly again, I think as Peter was suggesting, we should involve the local community in doing that.
Yeah, because I think just before officers come in, somebody who's been involved with football ground since mid-1990s, I do think people that live down there have been left behind, and they have had a lot to put up with, although a lot of it's been good, apart from getting relegated last year, but never mind. So I do think it's time that they do get something back, and having some form of access to the gym, or certainly having open spaces, putting tree planting might be a good idea, greenery, because they deserve something back. Anyway, officers, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out that I've worked with the landscape officer and we've looked in the locality, but excuse me, the issue is there isn't a great amount of open spaces around that area for like a replacement sports pitches. What we've looked at is whether we can gain the necessary funding to improve, the linear part and create a linear park. So, the play area that I showed you and the landing between the where the hotel is going to be located and town estate, really enhance that with appropriate landscape mitigation measures and things for the kids to use and to interact and to burn off a bit of energy. Whether we could incorporate some play facilities within there. Obviously, we'd like to consult residents and also with ward members further to decide what kind of treatments we could do. I think securing the money, financial contributions towards them kind of elements we can do. With regards to ensuring that gym membership and other provision, I think I'm not sure, but yeah, if that's all right, Matthias.
You've got £150,000 for the community to use there. It could be, as Chris has alluded to, a park area with rec space, or it could be, as the members and the committee members have suggested, gym memberships. It's for the community to spend that money replacing the lost space that the development is taking. If it meets a definition of recreation and community cohesion and well-being, then I think it comfortably fits within that 150,000. The money can be spent on the community in that way. So I think it is there, Councillor Patterson, consultation with ward members, the developer and those residents affected. Within that envelope of recreation, I think you've delivered on the outcomes you're hoping for.
Still not being moved. I'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. Right, are you okay with that? Because it is time that they had something back. Right, that's been moved by me, seconded by Councillor Patterson. All those in favour, please show. Cool, that's 6 for, 0 against. Next is page 87. And this is at Ashbrow, Huddersfield. We've had it before, and this is a little bit of a tweak to it. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Adam Walker. I'm the case officer on this application. So this is the site, edged red. It's a domed area of naturally regenerated land populated by trees, grass and shrubs. There's some protected trees along the site frontage. There's residential development nearby, infant and nursery school to the north, and some commercial uses as well to the west. The proposal is for 161 residential units, including a 50-bed extra care facility that will be owned and run by the council. So the extra care facility is up here, that's 50-bed, and then there's 111 dwellings in this part of the site. The application is essentially a modification of a 160-unit scheme that was approved by this committee last year. Since then, the land has been formally allocated for housing under the local plan. The applicant considers that some changes are necessary to enhance the viability and deliverability of the development and address some specific technical issues. So the starting point for officers' assessment is the extant permission, which I'll just show you. So that's the approved site layout plan. So just in terms of the changes, you see, this is, as I said, the approved plan. You can see these houses up here. They've now gone. We've got two extra houses in there, which previously the open space was a little bit bigger under the previous scheme in that part of the site. There's one extra house on the proposed scheme. We've changed the layout in this part of the site. So previously there was this private drive and there was going to be a link down some quite steep steps to the public right of way to the west. That's now gone. We've just got a sort of more of just a straight form of development there. There's some house type changes across the site, some minor level changes across the site, and there's just a bit less development in that part. That was going to be gardens previously, but now they're just not developing in there at all. And they've repositioned the retaining wall, so it's just a bit closer to the extra care facility. There's no changes proposed to the extra care facility itself. In terms of the assessment, as set out in the report, officers consider the proposed changes to be acceptable. The new house types are appropriate for the site. The level changes are all relatively minor, and acceptable separation distances are maintained to existing neighbouring properties. So that was something that when we discussed this at pre-application stage, we ensured that these separation distances to these houses, which are set down, are as per the approved scheme. The development also does not give rise to any materially greater highway impacts. 39% of the houses are going to be affordable, which is almost double the policy requirement. Affordable housing is pepper potted across the site in three clusters. So up here, cluster there, and then cluster down at the bottom. There's areas of open space provided within the development, and an off-site commuted sum for equipped play provision within the vicinity of the site will be provided. There would also be education and sustainable travel contributions. Now, in terms of trees and ecology, and to pick up on the issues raised in the deputation earlier on, I'll just show you. So this is the arboricultural impact assessment plan. You've got in blue, you can see the protected trees that are to be retained. Under this current scheme, there is
proposed to be a slightly greater loss of protected trees in that part of the site, those 4 just there. And officers have gone back to the applicant and asked them to review that and see if we can keep at least a couple of those trees if possible. So if the applicant's going to look at that, and if officers can get those kept, then we will do that. A landscaping scheme has been provided with the application, which includes some new tree planting within the site, for example, within the areas of open space. And that's just an extract from this top corner of the site, so there's some additional planting going in there as well. There's also conditions recommended for a construction environmental management plan for biodiversity, a landscape and ecological management plan, a lighting design strategy for biodiversity, a construction environmental management plan to cover noise and dust, lighting, working hours, etc., and contaminated land conditions. There's been 6 representations received in response to the publicity, and these are summarised in the main report and the update. In summary, the extant permission and proposed developments are fundamentally very similar, and the proposed changes do not give rise to any materially greater planning impacts than the previous scheme. The proposals are therefore considered to be acceptable, and the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I propose that we accept this. I was just going to ask whether the issue about affordable homes, which was talked about quite a lot on previous occasions, that they were still where they were, that they were not all in one corner, which wasn't a very good idea. But we've had reassurance that they are in, around the site. It is extremely acceptable that the percentage of affordable homes is so high in this case, and I think that it has every expectation of being a successful development. I'd just like to ask, though, in view of the deputation we had at the beginning about trees, are there enough trees on the site? Because in many ways we can't have too many, and I think it's important that as much green vegetation as possible is incorporated in the development from its start. But with that proviso, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was very quick. I didn't realise there wasn't a list. I like a lot of what Councillor Pinnock said. I recall quite some time back we had concerns about the location of the affordable housing. It still seems to be a little bit clustered to my mind, but it's certainly a lot better than it was. I think the main thing I would like to say is that we do need these extra care facilities. We've had a massive shortfall in social care facilities, so I really am glad to see that coming forward, and I would like to see it brought forward as quickly as possible. And I think that's enough, sir.
I just second the proposal.
We'll show you the plan, Chair. We'll show you the plan of where
if you can. Yeah.
Yeah, through you, Chair. So, yeah, just to confirm the affordable housing in 3 different clusters. Got it. So, yeah, it's in three different areas within the site, and the affordable houses cover up all the different house types on the site. So you've got some semis, some detached and terraced houses. So you've got a good mix there. In terms of the trees, I'll just show the landscaping plan. I mean, in comparison to the previous permission, it is very similar. It's quite a dense development. It's an efficient use of the land, so there is that benefit. We've got the pockets of open space where we have got some planting in there, and we would be securing that and getting a management plan through condition. So I would say it's probably the best we can get.
Those blue dots
Yeah, and those blue dots on there just represent the affordable as well.
This has been moved and seconded. Do we agree? We in favour of this application, please show. Thank you. 6 for, none against. Next item is a position statement, and this is at Owl Lane, Dewsbury.
Thank you, Chair. Victor Grayson, Development Management Master Planner, Majors and Minerals team. This is an application for full planning permission for a residential development of 252 units. The applicant is Barratt Homes. The site is just under 8 hectares in size and is allocated for residential use in the local plan. The site is to the southwest of the larger mixed-use allocation site MXS7, which is owned by the Church Commissioners for England and for which a pre-application position statement was brought to the Strategic Planning Committee in July of this year. The Council is yet to receive planning applications for that site. The site was within the Greenbelt, but with the adoption of the local plan and the site allocation, it was taken out of the Greenbelt, and in planning terms, the site is a previously undeveloped greenfield site. The site generally slopes downhill from north to south. The site is bounded by Owl Lane to the west, Windsor Road to the north, Tidwell Lane to the east, and the borough boundary shared with Wakefield forms the southern boundary of the site. Land to the south, beyond the site boundary, is within Wakefield's Greenbelt. To the west is the Dewsbury Rams rugby ground and the recent Amberwood Chase residential development. And then here are 4 photographs of the site viewed from the entrance to that Amberwood Chase residential development, panning from south to north. You can see the water tower, which is in Wakefield Borough, in the distance. And the buildings in the middle of that picture are the residential properties on the north side of Windsor Road. To the east is Chidswell Farm and its farm shop, the Huntsman Pub, agricultural fields, a small woodland and residential properties. The site itself is a single field in agricultural use. There are long views of Castle Hill and Emily Moor Mast in the far distance. The site has a single existing point of access on Chiswell Lane. No public rights-of-way across the site. The site has no TPO protected trees. However, it does have perimeter hedgerows. As regards what's proposed, this is the proposed layout. 225 dwellings are proposed either side of a new east-west spine road, which would connect a new roundabout on Owl Lane with the eastern edge of the site at Chidswell Lane. For the time being, a vehicular connection would not be made between the spine road and Chidswell Lane. 2 open spaces are proposed either side of the spine road, and a third open space is proposed at the southern tip, the lowest part of the site. The residential units would comprise 60 2-bedroom, 133 3-bedroom, and 59 4-bedroom dwellings. 50 units would be affordable in the form of 25 2-bedroom and 23 3-bedroom dwellings. This represents a 19.8% provision. Dwellings would be detached, semi-detached or provided in short terraces. All will be 2 stories in height. 12 house types are proposed. The proposed materials include red and buff brick, artificial stone and grey and red roof tiles. The drainage proposals, that's just to illustrate the dwellings. In terms of drainage proposals, the applicants propose a buried attenuation tank at the lowest part of the site, which would then discharge to the existing watercourse that runs along the site's southern boundary. Foul water will be directed to the existing sewer beneath Owl Lane. The requirements of site allocation HS47 are summarised at paragraphs 6.2 and 6.3 of the position statement. Of particular note, the site allocation sets out an indicative site capacity of 280 units, so this site could make a significant contribution towards housing delivery and meeting targets in Kirklees. The site allocation also requires the previously mentioned vehicular connection between our lane and the adjacent and Chidswell Lane to provide access to the adjacent allocated site MXS7. The site allocation also requires a landscape buffer along the site's southern boundary, and it also refers to the mitigation of development's impacts upon the surrounding highway network. Because of the site allocation, which carries full weight, the principle of development and land use, the proposed land use, is considered acceptable. The highways impacts of the proposed development and the cumulative impacts of this and other developments coming forward in the area are, of course, a key consideration. The applicant has asserted that the proposed development on its own would have negligible or acceptable impacts on local roads and junctions. However, traffic, congestion and highway safety impacts figure in many of the objections received in response to the Council's consultation. The relevant site allocation, as said before, notes that impacts on the wider highway network will need to be mitigated, and discussions regarding these matters are ongoing with Highways officers, Highways England, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and Wakefield and Leeds councils. The capacity and detailed design of the proposed roundabout and the spine road are also being assessed, as is the detailed internal layout having regard to the newly adopted Highways Design Guide, highway safety, proposed parking provision, future-proofing for a possible bus service which may run along the spine road, pedestrian and cyclist provision, waste storage and collection arrangements, and the applicant's proposed measures to encourage the use of sustainable modes of transport. The apportionment of Section 106 responsibilities related to highways improvement works is also being considered. The proposed quantum of development is of concern. Site allocation HS47 sets out a site capacity of 280 units, whereas only 252 are proposed. Although the proposed roundabout and the spine road have reduced the site's developable area, there is still scope for denser development than that currently proposed. Flats and possibly three-storey elements could be included, as could variations in typologies to help bring unit numbers closer to the expected 280 units. The proposed layout is generally considered acceptable in design terms, although concerns are set out at paragraphs 10.18 onwards of the position statement, and changes will of course need to be made to accommodate additional units. I should say that the applicants, when submitting the application, they had to submit the application by a certain date for contractual reasons, and upon submitting the application did advise officers that they would be open to amending the scheme during the life of the application. Open spaces are proposed in appropriate locations. Landscape officers have commented on the proposed development this morning, advising that more detail of the proposed open spaces would be needed, as would a locally equipped area of play with 20-metre standoff distances from dwellings and a 179,555. Did I say that right? £179,555 financial contribution to address shortfalls. Of note, Dewsbury East has shortfalls in its quantity of natural and semi-natural green space and allotments. Impacts upon the amenities of existing neighbouring residential properties would be acceptable. The quality of the proposed residential accommodation is generally satisfactory. However, several units would not meet the government's nationally described space standards, in some cases significantly so. This is a major and unacceptable shortcoming of the proposed development, and the applicant has been advised that this will need to be rectified. Adequate affordable housing is proposed. I should note that the assessment at paragraph 10.51 of the position statement isn't quite right. 50 out of 252 units would be an acceptable affordable housing provision. Although the overall number of units is to increase in response to the requests of officers, and of course so too will the number of affordable units within that provision. Regarding biodiversity, the applicant has asserted that the site is of low value in terms of habitats. However, a net biodiversity gain still needs to be demonstrated by the applicant, and this will need addressing. Yesterday, a resident submitted video footage of bats at a site on Chidswell Lane within 1 kilometre of the site. Regarding climate change and sustainability, the application site is a sustainable location for residential development. Electric vehicle charging points would be required, as would the implementation of a travel plan, and drainage and flood risk minimisation measures would need to account for climate change. The applicant's drainage proposals are being considered by the lead local flood authority. They are fairly simple in that the site would drain southwards to the attenuation tank previously mentioned that would in turn drain to the existing watercourse. A recently submitted health impact assessment is also under consideration and archaeological information is awaited. Should full planning permission be granted at a future meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee, planning obligations would need to be secured via a Section 106 agreement in relation to affordable housing, open space, education, highways works and improvements, sustainable transport, drainage, management and maintenance, and decentralised energy. 193 objections have been received to date, together with a detailed objection from the Chidswell Action Group. This is summarised in the committee update note. All objections have been posted online. The Chidswell Action Group have also this week submitted a technical note raising concerns relevant to highways matters. This is also being reviewed. The position statement does not include a recommendation for determination. Instead, questions regarding each relevant planning consideration are set out through the position statement and are repeated at paragraph 11.1. Members' responses and comments are invited. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair, members. Thank you for letting me speak today. I'm not going to take 3 minutes. It was more just to say that we're working very closely with the council. That's something we've done for a number of months and also probably more than a year now. We'll continue to do that through the course of the application, in particular with highways officers and drainage officers. We've been through the 193 responses and we have obviously seen the highways technical note that's been submitted this week. We'll go through that in detail as well. So I just want to give you the comfort there that we'll take obviously every comment seriously and respond with robust evidence where we can. We're here to listen today. I'm here with my pad and pen to hear any comments that are made, any questions that are raised, and we fully intend the next time we're at committee to be able to be in a position where all issues have been resolved and you've got the evidence there to back that up. And I just wanted to say I'm happy to take any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. As just one sort of key concern I have in terms of the design of the site. When I look at it, I look where a lot of the parking spaces are in relation to the properties. In a lot of cases, the parking spaces are detached from the properties. My experience of new estates where this happens is people might have a parking space that isn't outside their house, and then what they do is just park on the road in front of their house where there's not an allocated parking space, which then, when the roads are already very narrow in these estates down to the planning requirements, this causes significant congestion. So that sort of is certainly a concern when I'm looking, and I think when I was studying the plans, I think it would be relatively easy just to rejig the location of some of the houses and things in order to get those parking spaces next to the houses so that you can ensure that people do use them. And in addition, I think there should be some scope to allow for some form of visited parking because, again, I can just sort of see that you might have one house, two house, you meet the minimum parking requirement, then all the overflow cars just end up getting dumped willy-nilly everywhere, which does often happen to be the case. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I think it's a good scheme anyway. Yeah. I just want to ask the question about that somebody raised, about the cycle lane and link with footways. Is there any proposal there?
Shall I respond to both, please? Yeah, thank you. Car parking first. Thank you for the question. It's a hugely important issue on any layout and can dictate how a layout works or not. What we've tried to do is balance that parking provision across the scheme, so you have front of plot parking in certain areas, detached parking or parking by driveways and garages. one thing we've tried to do, and I think this probably relates to the comments on where the parking spaces aren't directly in front of plots or houses, are where we've fronted on to try and create a car-free street scene. So particularly on the southern half of the site to the south of the new roundabout, you'll see there's a row of housing there that overlooks the frontage. So when it's an access node that's quite important from an urban design point of view. So when you approach the scheme, you're not seeing cars. So that's one element there. But we can work through that with officers, and that's something we'll definitely look at and take into important consideration. A key element of that is the housing mix, of course. We've got 193 2- and 3-bedroom properties. So that obviously has a byproduct in terms of housing. So there's a benefit and a sort of a con there, so to speak. But that's one thing that we need to look at, and we'll do in detail. So thank you for that. Second question in terms of cycle lanes. Actually, on this site, I think we really respond very positively to that. I think along the entirety of Owl Lane Leeds Road, you have a 3-metre cycle and pedestrian access point. Then when you move into the site from the roundabout, so you go into the site onto the new proposed spine road, either side of that road there's a 2-metre highway verge, then a 3-metre cycle and pedestrian route along either side of the spine road. And then moving further along Windsor Road, on our northern boundary, we've then again got a 2-metre verge and a 3-metre cycle pedestrian route. So every single key access route through and across the site is provided with, we would hope, adequate and quite positive cycle links.
This is a question to the planning officer, really. It was mentioned on the bus about the relationship between Kirklees and Wakefield on this issue. I understand that Wakefield have objected to the allocation of this site. And I can't say I blame them in a way, because the field to the south of the site is in their greenbelt. If this were to be developed, it isolates that field, and they clearly think that it then puts it under threat. I'd just like to hear what planning officers think about this relationship, and whether if there are any other. I understand there's something about no right or left turns from the junction going across the site, presumably to stop vehicles going down the narrow part of Chidswell Lane. So, but I mean, otherwise, I think it looks okay, apart from the things that have already been mentioned.
Through you, Chair. On the issue of Greenbelt, yes, Wakefield Council objected to the allocation of the site or removal of the site from Kirklees' Greenbelt at the time the local plan was being prepared, and the local plan inspector did disagree with that argument, and she took the view that there were exceptional circumstances that warranted the release of this site from the Greenbelt. One thing that was included in the site allocation for this site was the previously mentioned green planted buffer along the south edge of the site, which could help. The image isn't on the screen at the moment, but that could help reduce impacts on the adjacent greenbelt within Wakefield. Wakefield Council also did, yes, ask for restrictions on right turn and left turn movements into Chiswell Lane from this site and the adjacent Church Commissioners site. They maintain that those restrictions are needed, but for the time being, those restrictions wouldn't be brought into force because, as mentioned on the committee bus today, currently, under these proposals, the east-west spine road would not make a physical vehicular connection to Chidswell Lane. It would be stopped off at its east end. Connection to Chidswell Lane would come in the future as and when the Church Commissioners site is developed. And at that point, the left and right turns would either be implemented, or we'll give that further consideration in light of Wakefield Council's evidence. But yeah, the restrictions that Wakefield asked for were to do with the width and capacity of Chidswell Lane, and objections from the residents of Chidswell Lane within Wakefield.
Can I just come back on that, because presumably the lack of access onto Chidswell Lane would be done by a planning condition, but that's okay insofar as until the other application is dealt with, how do you then make it possible to make an access across there? Because then that would be outside the red line of the other application. So how do you then activate that? I mean, there might be a comment from the applicant in this case, but I just want to understand the mechanism.
Through you, Chair, the current applicants, Barratt Homes, they are willing to allow that access to be provided at a future date. They know that it's required in the site allocation for this site. To make sure it happens as and when it's needed, we'll use either conditions or a Section 106 agreement or a Section possibly 27. One of the highways acts sections in one of the Highways Act can be used if Section 106 agreements aren't relevant. But there are ways of securing it. We haven't worded the relevant conditions or obligations yet.
Yeah, sorry, yeah. I mean, the current red line boundary goes up to Chiswell Lane, which is an adopted highway. So we just want, as long as there's no ransom strip between their site and the adopted highway, there won't be a problem. And the adjacent site will also butt up to the adopted highway boundary. The mechanism of how that is implemented will need some careful thought. Just thinking about how we would ban it, and there could be people on there who will object to not be able to go. Who can currently use Chiswell Lane as it is presently, would have quite a significant detour. So it'll have to be given some serious thought at the time, whether we think about it now or when the larger site comes forward. It could be a little bit tricky just accommodating that.
Yeah. I mean that's clearly likely to be an issue. So as you say, it needs to be treated with some care. But another issue that was brought up on the bus was the size of the roundabout on Owl Lane. I mean, on the plan that was up, first of all, it looks quite big. They've taken a huge chunk out of the site. I presume that the size of that roundabout is to take account of any future.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing
from the other site as well.
So yeah, I mean the thing we've got the transport assessment which assesses the current application, but we need to ensure obviously this spine road is required to connect to the adjacent site to the east. And we need to ensure that the infrastructure has sufficient capacity to accommodate the traffic that's going to come from the adjacent site. We've had an initial discussion, some initial assessment of it, and some discussions with the applicant's consultant. We personally think it's right at capacity, and it probably needs to be a little bit bigger, or the lanes certainly need looking at, and we've instructed them to do that. But we're keen that this developer talks to the other one so that we get a joined up approach. The last thing we want is this to get built and then there's not be enough capacity in this junction to accommodate the flows from the other side. So we're trying to do a comprehensive job. We've also got to consult Highways England and the impact it's going to have on the Street Road net, which is something that's ongoing as well in the background. So it's a bit of a juggling act trying to get it all together at the moment. But we want to try to make sure that we're not we're accommodating all the future growth from both sides.
Any more questions?
That's it, we can all go home.
All right,